What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Coach Sean's Kitchen. Today, I'm going to show you how I meal prep, and I'm making some Asian beef and broccoli. If you want to see how to create amazing, delicious meals that you actually look forward to eating, you're not going to want to miss this episode. This is Coach Sean's Kitchen. Just a reminder, guys, if you like Coach Sean's Kitchen and you want to see more of what I'm doing, then please subscribe to my channel, hit that like button, hit that notification button, and consider sharing it on social media and telling a friend. It's the single best thing you can do to help Coach Sean's Kitchen. Now let's jump right into this episode by making our sauce. And the foundation of this is going to begin with a 1/4 cup of oyster sauce. This is one of those ingredients I love using because it packs so much flavor for so few carbs. In addition to this, we're gonna add some soy sauce, a little hit of ketchup, some rice wine vinegar, some freshly grated ginger and garlic, as well as some chicken stock or whatever stock you have lying around. Once I've got everything in the bowl, I'm gonna add about a tablespoon of cornstarch, and this is gonna help thicken our sauce a little bit later. Now that our stir-fry sauce is done, I'm gonna set it aside until I need it. The next thing we're gonna do is we're going to prep our beef. Normally when you make an Asian stir-fry like this, you'll pre-cut your beef and you'll stir-fry the small pieces. I find that when I'm doing this at home in a saute pan and in large quantity, that cooking the meat whole and slicing it afterwards works a lot better. So what I have here is 1.5 pounds of flank steak. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit the outside with just some kosher salt and some freshly ground black pepper. Then I'm gonna dust about a tablespoon of cornstarch on both sides of the flank steak. And then when we go to sear this is gonna help a crust to develop, create a fond in the bottom of our pan, and also help thicken our sauce towards the end. So once our flank steak is seasoned, I'm gonna head over to my stove. I've got my saute pan on medium-high heat, and I've got some avocado oil in the pan. As long as you're using an oil with a high smoke point, you should be good. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my flank steak into this pan, and I'm gonna cook it for about 6 to 7 minutes per side until I got a good crust along the outside. I'm not really looking to completely cook this flank steak through because we're gonna finish cooking it in the end with the rest of the ingredients. Once I've got a good char on the outside of my flank steak, I'm gonna remove it and I'm gonna allow it to cool completely. The same thought to why we rest the steak after we cook it applies here. We want all the juices to be reabsorbed back into that flank steak before we go cutting it. Now the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna prep my broccoli. One of my favorite ways to eat broccoli is charring it on the outside in the oven and then cooking it as usual, whether that's stir frying it or throwing it right into a meal. So I've got a few crowns of broccoli head, and I'm gonna trim it off, and as long as all the broccoli is approximately the same size, you'll be good. I'm gonna put it all on a sheet pan, and then I'm gonna toss it with a little bit of toasted sesame oil for a little bit of Asian flair, and then I'm gonna hit it with just a little bit of salt. Then I'm gonna toss it to ensure it's thoroughly combined, and then it's gonna go into a 500-degree oven for about 10 to 12 minutes. And I'm looking for the broccoli to get a little bit of a char on the top of it. You might think it looks burnt, but I guarantee you that is flavor. Now that our flank steak has cooled completely, I'm going to slice it thinly. Now what I want you to pay attention to is the way the grain is running. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut it in thirds with the grain, creating very long muscle fibers. Then I'm gonna turn it perpendicular and I'm gonna slice it very thin. Flank steak is known for its flavor. It's not known for its tenderness. And if you don't cut the flank steak correctly, you're gonna be chewing for days. So once I've got all my flank steak cut up, I'm gonna return to the stove. Here you can see that I left all the oil and even that fond in the bottom. And you're gonna see that we're gonna deglaze the pan and all of that fond is gonna turn into a beautiful sauce. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna toss in my flank steak, and then I'm gonna throw in my broccoli. And I'm just gonna give it a good 30-second minute head start to start warming up. Then I'm gonna add my sauce. Once I add my sauce into the pan, I'm gonna bring it to a simmer. and then I'm gonna start scraping the bottom to release all of those little burn bits into my sauce. Then I'm looking to cook it for about 5 more minutes until the broccoli is tender and the meat is cooked through. Now here's where you need to be a chef. If your sauce starts to really thin out and it gets a little dry, don't be afraid to add a little extra stock into the pan. Now the last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna taste some broccoli and I'm gonna taste some beef and I'm going to adjust for seasoning. Mine needed a touch of pepper, but it was spot on. Let's plate it up. Now since this recipe was made for meal prep, I've got my 5 containers out. And the way I like to dish it up is I like to eyeball it first, putting about equal amounts into each container. And then since all my containers are the same, I will just weigh them completely and then adjust any amounts that I need to. The last thing I'm gonna do is hit it with a little bit of sesame seeds because why not? It looks gorgeous. And take a look at this meal prep. If you brought this to work or even whipped this out of your fridge, you would be so excited to try this. And the macros break down beautifully. To each one of these meals, we're only looking at about 20 fat, 17 carb with the majority being broccoli, to 40 grams of protein. Now if your macros call for some additional carbohydrates, don't be afraid to add some rice. Possibly cook up some cauliflower rice or some more stir-fried vegetables. So I hope you enjoyed this first edition of the Healthy Meal Prep. And if you did, please like this video, hit that subscribe button, and tell a friend. And if you guys ever have any questions on how to meal prep and hit your macros, please send me a message. I'm always willing to talk to you guys. And until next time, you guys can make anything homemade and healthy.